All right, let's have a quick little conversation about numbers. The first thing I want to talk about, I want to ask a simple question, which is, are -3 and +3, are those the same thing? Obviously, they're not the same thing. So what I want us to look at when we look at those two numbers is I want us to look at what's different about them and what's the same about them. What's different about them is that one of them is negative, and one of them is positive. Right? So what's different about these two things is the sign of each number, right? That we have a negative sign on one of them, we have a positive sign on the other thing. What's the same about them? This is maybe something where we have a little bit more trouble describing what's happening here. We can say, well, they're both kinds of 3, and that's kind of a icky way to say it. So it turns out there's a lot of different ways to talk about what's the same about these two things. I'm going to focus just on 2 of them right now, and I'm going to do it on this piece of paper. So here are 2 ways that we can talk about what's the same about -3 and +3. One of them is to say that -3 and +3 are the same distance from 0, or the same difference, if you prefer that word. That the difference between -3 and 0 is the same thing as the difference between +3 and 0. We can see this on the number line pretty clearly, right? Here's -3, here's +3. If we look at how far away these things are from 0, right? Here, -3 is 1, 2, 3 units away from 0, and +3 is also 1, 2, 3 units away from 0. Right? Now, they're obviously in different directions, and we could actually see that direction issue sort of being related to the fact that they're different signs. But what's the same about these two numbers, -3 and +3, is that they're the same distance away from 0. Another way to say that is that what do we think? The difference, right, this is going to be that idea that we talked about just a second ago, the difference between -3 and 0 is the same as what? Well, yeah, the difference between +3 and 0. That distance away from 0, that difference between the number and 0 is the same. It's 3 on both of these things. The other way that we can talk about what's the same about -3 and +3, even though they have different signs, we could in a certain sense say that they are the same size. A little bit more of a mathy word for what's the same about them is the word magnitude, or magnitude. Magnitude is essentially just a fancy, sciencey, mathy word for size. And I guess the easiest way for me to talk about this is to think about where we see these things visually. A lot of times you'll hear people talk about a negative number being like a hole in the ground. So we could have a 3-foot hole. And then, so we'll call this a 3-foot hole, right? And we can think of this as being like if you were standing down there, you'd be standing at -3 feet. Whereas a +3 is like a 3-foot mountain. So here's where the ground is. Here's 3 feet, right? So the hole in the mountain here, they're the same size, but one of them is in the negative direction, the other one's in the positive direction. So another way to talk about what's the same about -3 and +3, even though they're not the same value, they are the same size. In math, the word that we use to describe that idea of size or distance from 0 is absolute value. It's sort of the value of a number, but it completely ignoring whether it's positive or negative. The symbols that we use to write absolute values, to be able to describe or write down just that idea of the size of it, we call those symbols vertical bars, And we call them vertical bars because they're literally just bars that go up and down. So if we want to write the absolute value of W, we would write a vertical bar with a W and another vertical bar. So it's the W inside of the vertical bars is the absolute value of W. So this gives us the size of W. So how big are some basic numbers? Well, how big is -3? Well, -3 is 3 away from 0. It's 3 numbers big if you want to say it really, really badly. How big is +3? Well, +3 is also of size 3. How big is -8? Well, -8 is 8 away from 0. The size of -8 is 8. A lot of times you'll hear bad teachers say that absolute values just make things positive. That's a horrible, horrible, bad way to talk about what's happening. Absolute values give you a measurement. They give you the measurement of the size of the number, or they give you the measurement of how far away the number is from 0. Do not just think about it as absolute values make things positive.